Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 50th part of What If Deku Can't Stop Adopting Kids. Hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 267, Operation Concert. Izuku sat at his desk, thinking deeply about the matter at hand. The Foot had come back with a bang, and even with his army they made it very clear they were still a threat. One that would take the lives of many of his men if left unchecked. If only I had some way to lure them out. Izuku lamented. If he could just deal with them all in one fell swoop, that would make things so much easier. But doing so was easier said than done. It was obvious they wanted him dead. But they knew what resources he had available to him. They wouldn't pull an all-out attack unless they were sure they had a good shot at him. Ding! Suddenly Izuku got a text. Checking it out, Izuku found it was from Shina. Hey Mr. Midoriya, could we go to a concert that's happening soon? Izuku sighed. Unfortunately, he couldn't allow them to go. Not in light of these recent attacks. If they went to a concert now, there was little that would keep the Foot from teleporting in real quick and killing them. And that's when Izuku suddenly got an idea. A concert. Of course. If they think I'm going to a casual event like that, they'd take that as a chance to get me with my guard down. Izuku thought. But I need to not only make sure I bring enough forces with me to apprehend them, but I also need to make sure they don't suspect that it's actually a trap. But I can't just use any old band. They'd have to be able to defend themselves if worst comes to worst. Actually, now that I think about it, I do know of one. Izuku pulled up his phone and made a call. Hello? Mr. Midoriya? Mai answered. Do you need something? Yeah, Blue Blur has a band, doesn't he? Izuku asked her. Yeah. He started a band with his brother and sister. They occasionally play at certain places. Sometimes they play at concerts too. Mai said. They're pretty good actually, really underrated in my opinion. Although I may be a bit biased. I have an offer for them, Izuku said. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX his couch. He hadn't been expecting to get a call from the Izuku Midoriya today. Let alone a call proposing that he and his siblings perform in concert meant to lure out extremely dangerous criminals. I understand if you want to refuse, I am asking you to put you and your family in danger, Izuku said. Yeah, I'm gonna have to run it by them first, but honestly, knowing them, they'll probably say yes. Blue shrugged. Still, what happens if they don't show? Then me and a few choice people get a good show. Izuku sighed. Just call me when you've got an answer. Thank you for your time. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX gathered in his office. Achiko, Todoroki, and Bakugo. I have a special assignment for you three. Your first undercover assignment, in a way. Nizu explained. As I'm sure you're aware, the Midoriya Foundation has been working tirelessly to try and deal with the many terrorist groups that have been targeting them. And as of recently, they have a brand scheme in the works that I'd like you all to take part in. I'll do it, Achiko said firmly, donning a look of fierce determination. TCH. What exactly does he want us to do? Bakugo asked. So, in a couple of weeks, there will be a fake concert. The purpose of which will be to lure out attackers, and then defeat them. Nizu explained. Aside from Midoriya himself, several of his more elite forces, bodyguards, and many pro-heroes will be attending in disguise. And I'd like for you three to attend as well. Uraraka already made her thoughts clear, but I also accept, Todoroki said. What about you, Bakugo? Want to help your old victim? Shut it, icy hot. Bakugo growled. And I'm in. Not like I got anything better to do. Perfect. However, you three will need to be in disguise. Nizu explained. Completely unrecognizable. Fortunately, the Midoriya Foundation provided us with some. Suddenly, 3 mind weavers appeared on Nizu's desk, having been there the whole time, but using their abilities to stay invisible. These 3 Grimm are called mind weavers. They have the ability to make illusions. Just have them on you, and you'll be able to look like whatever you want. Nizu explained. Everyone there will have them. Except for Midoriya himself. He wants to be somewhat recognizable so the trap will work. Isn't he putting himself in a bit too much danger? Ochako asked. Couldn't he just let someone else do this, using these spiders? True, but then as soon as they figure out Midoriya isn't there, they're going to leave, Nizu said. Midoriya hopes his continued presence will help make sure they stick around. Yeah, that sounds like something he'd do. Bakugo and Todoroki at the same time, surprising the both of them for a second, before the two glared at each other. Regardless, Midoriya has no intention of dying, and several little surprises in the works to make sure this goes well. Nizu chuckled. I'm very excited. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Keita asked. This time she'd come to see Izuku in person, the two meeting in Izuku's office. We've done a good job rooting out potential spies from the army, but I'm not deluded enough to think we've gotten rid of all of them, Izuku explained. Not to mention, the majority of our troops are woefully ill-equipped to take care of foes like this. So I'd like to keep this operation down to more elite members of the army, as well as outside help. That being yourself, a few friends from the UA, some pro heroes, and some of my bodyguards. As well as some new members of our armies. Do you remember what I told you about more powerful allies? Suddenly, the door opened and a young man stepped in. Morning, sir. The man appeared to be mostly made of metal, with the only human parts of him being his face and white hair. Although he had a robotic eye patch, the rest of his body was made of black metal. Complicated but cool-looking robot parts. This is Raiden. His real name is classified by his request, so please don't ask about it. Izuku said. He's our first true success with project mechanization. And he'll serve as the leader of an elite task force that will soon be under the Midoriya Foundation army. And he'll be joining us during the attack. Nice to have you. Hope you're worth the money those parts no doubt cost. Keita said, looking him over. I'll try to make myself useful. Raiden chuckled. Nice to meet you in general. Use my sword carefully. Speaking of swords. Izuku reached under his desk. I have something for you. He then pulled a black sword, with a fractal embedded in the hilt. This is yours, Izuku said, handing the weapon to his general. The sword itself is mostly just a decoration. You could use it, but I don't see why you would. The main draw is the fractal. It simply increases the power of your flames, and thus the constructs you create. Keita smirked as she looked over the weapon. And it's in my color. Boss, you spoil me. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX half-fly-man scientist, something fierce. This crystal is just far too advanced. Too chaotic. The flyman said. Any further attempts to try and replicate this will just dissolve into disaster and damage to our own property. Very expensive damage. Not to mention the cost of resources dash. What you're telling me is that I stole this from the Midoriya Foundation, for nothing. Shredder shouted, his claws popping out, causing everyone to recoil in fear. And not nothing, sir. The flyman stuttered. While recreating it is off of the table for now, we can use it to create something worthwhile. Why, you see, I've been analyzing the Midoriya Foundation's androids, and using these, I might be able to make something comparable to them. Comparable to those androids, how soon can you make it? And how many? Shredder asked. I've already been making some mock designs in my spare time. I just needed the final piece. It should take me a week. The man said. As for the amount, currently only one can be made. TCH. Make it. Shredder ordered. And I want your most powerful machines, ready and able to strike at my command. Are you preparing another raid, sir? The scientist asked. Perhaps, Shredder said, before turning away and walking out of the lab. Or perhaps, something greater. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX all donning different colors. The yellow ninja. Scorpion. The purple ninja. Rain. The blue ninja. Sub-Zero. The green ninja. Reptile. The only one of them who clearly had a mutant quirk, looking like a giant humanoid lizard with a razor-sharp maw. The black ninja. Cybot. And the gray ninja, leader of the Foot. The Shredder. What exactly has caused you to call us all back from our missions, Shredder? Rain asked, sounding very annoyed. It is not often that all 6 great heads of the Foot meet in one place. Reptile said. I assume this must have to do with the actions of your foolish, and now very dead, daughter, Cybot said. Hold your tongue, Cybot. Shredder hissed. If you're referring to my daughter entering us into a war with the Midoriya Foundation, do not blame her for that. Blame that accursed rat. Once he joined the Foundation, becoming our enemy was inevitable. And yet, despite that, you left the task of dealing with them to your daughter. Rain scoffed. When clearly she couldn't even handle the rat by himself. There is no point in complaining about events that cannot be changed, Scorpion spoke up. Shredder. What is your plan? I want all of our assets close to hand. To be ready to attack Midoriya as soon as an opportunity presents itself. Shredder revealed. Over-eagerness is what led your daughter to an early grave. Sub-Zero pointed out. And yet, with each second, the boy grows stronger. Shredder pointed out. He can track teleportation, freely open portals himself, commands a powerful army, as well as 2 androids who command near all-might levels of power. Soon he'll be able to find us no matter where we hide, and he'll bring his full might down upon us. We need to kill him, and then dismantle his organization piece by piece. First, him. Then his scientists. Then his generals. And so on. As much as I hate to admit it, you have a point. Rain said. But doing that is easier said than done. As you said, the boy can open portals wherever he pleases. If you don't kill him within seconds, he'll escape. Only if he has access to the facility which manages his teleportation, Shredder said. And my men have been working on infiltrating his ranks. And I've finally gotten some men working in that facility. They can take it over for a short while, and keep him from getting away, long enough for us to kill him. We simply need a good opportunity. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Izuku asked, looking up at Giza. Yes. The foot spies have been promoted, and are ready to attempt sabotage. Giza said. Good. That should make the foot feel more comfortable to attack. Izuku said. The fact that Izuku could open portals when and wherever he wanted, was always going to make his opponents more hesitant to commit to attacks. And even more hesitant to stick around when they do attack. So the solution to this was to make his enemies believe that he couldn't do that. While Izuku had gotten rid of most of the spies they'd been able to identify, he made certain not to get rid of all of them. As sometimes having enemy spies in your midst could be useful, if you can use them to feed the enemy bad information. So he took a few of those spies and promoted them so they'd have access to the warp tech. Hence their enemies would believe they'd be able to shut down, destroy, or take over their ability to open portals. When in reality the moment they attempted to do any of that, they would be immediately stopped, and used to feed false information to the attackers. It was a pretty smart plan if Izuku said so himself. Although there was of course one pretty big disadvantage. Namely, putting himself directly in harm's way. Of course, pretty much everyone tried to talk him out of showing up on the battlefield directly, and even worse, staying on the battlefield. But there was an issue with that. Should the foot have someone with a quirk that could identify that Izuku wasn't there, they would just leave. Therefore, defeating the whole purpose of this operation. But Izuku was confident in his planning. He wasn't just gambling his life away. Alright, the only thing left to do is wait, Izuku said. Chapter 268, Tomb of Greed. Alright Eri, I think it's time we started the real work, Rin said. He and Eri sat down on the couches in his private room. A room Izuku had given him specifically so he could have his sessions without having to use his office. Oh okay. Eri built up her resolve. She'd heard about this process from Izuku, and she'd known she'd be confronting some scary stuff. Oh, who was she kidding? She knew exactly what she was going to see. But this was her best chance to move past all that for good. And she wouldn't pass that up. She couldn't. I'm ready, Eri said, mustering up her determination. Ryan smiled. What a strong-willed girl. Alright, let's go to sleep. Welcome to the Velvet Room. Lavenza greeted with curtsy as Ren and Eri arrived. Hello. Eri greeted her. Ren had told her about Lavenza beforehand, so she wasn't surprised to see her. Lavenza smiled and pulled out a small glass. Here, I heard you liked apples, so I prepared some apple juice for you. It's nice to have something sweet before experiencing something bitter. Tea, thank you. Eri immediately took the glass and scarfed it down. It was so sweet and cold, it really did fill her with an extra confidence she really needed. Well then, let's not waste time, Ren said, standing up and getting ready to start the mission. Lavenza, do you have it ready? I do. It's not as bad as I feared. But Lavenza looked sorrowful. It's still rather upsetting. I know. I'm prepared for that. Ren said, before looking at Eri. I already asked you, but I need to confirm it. Are you ready to face your past? Can I have another juice? Eri asked. Lavenza smiled and served her another juice, which Eri promptly gulped down with gusto. After slamming the glass back down, she took a deep breath and then gave Ren a determined look. Look. I'm ready. She stood up, and the two of them walked to the back door. Ren opened the door, and the two of them entered. Headed into an old, new hell. They ended up at the entrance of a tomb. In front of them was a small stone building, with the words Shai Hasaikai etched into it. The area around them wasn't much to speak about. A forest filled with dead trees, the skies covered in thick black clouds making it hard to see with how little light got through. And blackbirds cawing, and flying around from wilted tree to wilted tree. A tomb. Ron was already thinking of several theories as to why this place appeared the way that it did. I guess Eri views the Shai Hasaikai as dead. Although if that was true we might not have had to come here either. Gonna need to see more. Eri on the other hand was completely shocked. She'd heard that her cognition would distort the places she thought of, but she hadn't fully understood what that meant. She still didn't. So it was more than a bit beguiling to see that the Yakuza base had been turned into this. But that didn't change what she had to do. Alright, let's go in shall we, Rin said, going up to the tomb and opening the stone doors. Behind them was just a staircase. One so long that they couldn't see the bottom. And it was dimly lit. Only bright by small, weak torches. Taking a deep breath, Eri followed Rin down the stairs, as they both descended into who knows what. The stairs truly went on for a while. The two descended for minutes without seeing the bottom. And with each step, it felt like it got colder and colder as the air grew stale. A suffocating feeling that Eri was all too familiar with. Why are these stairs so long? The place wasn't this deep underground, although it felt like it sometimes. Oh. Eri suddenly realized what run had meant. Because it felt like it was so far away, it became like this in my head. Did I feel like this place was a tomb? That feels right. They kept going a bit further down, until eventually, they finally reached the bottom. There they were met with a large room. Made of stone as one would expect, the dark, cold, stale environment didn't improve one bit when they entered. The room was mostly empty, the only thing inside, being 3 large bird statues. Eri immediately got a bad feeling from those statues. Like they were watching her. Like they were alive. Before they could think about that, suddenly people ran in from the other side of the room. Birdmen. 8 humanoid crows, wearing black robes. Finally, we found her, said one of the birds looking at Eri. The key. We found the key. Ka. The eternal sacrifice that will resurrect the Shai Hasaki. Grab her. They shouted as all of them flew at them. Get ready. Ren shouted as he pulled out his weapons. Arsene. Arsene appeared behind him in a burst of flames, stunning Eri for a second, before she turned focus back on the birdmen. Bang! 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 Ren shot at the birdmen, while Arsene threw fire at them, taking out a few of them, while the rest of them descended on him. All except for one, which flew right at Eri. Ah! Eri immediately ran back, all the courage she'd built up vanished as she looked at the bird, and images of her past came bubbling up into her eyes. She ran towards the staircase, but the birdman was faster, and flew over there first, blocking her exit. With no other option, Eri ran to the right, as the bird chased her, until eventually, she reached a wall. Eri turned around, only to see the birdman right on top of her, its wings spread out, blocking her from escaping, as it loomed over her, a menacing grin on its beak. Finally caught you, Eri. Suddenly Overhaul's voice came from the birdman, causing Eri to completely freeze up in terror. Eri, she recalled Overhaul, strapping her to a chair, leaving her powerless, as his hand came closer. Her in mind both Overhaul and the bird overlapped, as the bird backed her against the wall, and reached for her. Eri's breath became rapid, her chest rising up and down rapidly, and yet her body only grew colder, as she felt control over her limbs vanished, and she fell on her butt. It was time. It was time for her to die again. Eri! Ren shouted, his strong commanding voice cutting through the panic attack she was having for a moment. If only barely. You're not the person you were before. You're stronger now. You have people rooting for you. Show them, Eri. Show them who you are. What you became. Show them. What I am. Eri said through her hagged breaths. Who am I? I'm Eri. Eri Midoriya. Eri thought, and immediately, something warm filled her. Midoriya. Yeah, I am a Midoriya. Just like Dad. And like my brothers and sisters. That's right, Eri. Now she heard Izuku's voice in her head. And the warmth continued to fill her body, so much so that she started to glow. You're my daughter. Eri Midoriya. You are loved. You are powerful, and you are free. Never forget that. We're all rooting for you, Eri. She heard Kyoko's voice. They mess with the Eri, they get the horn. Give it to them, Eri. She heard Kei now. Eri. 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 She heard the voices of her siblings in her head. Each one makes the light glow brighter and brighter. Aga. The birdman stumbled back, covering its eyes. Too much light. Right. Now I remember. Eri said, her breathing returning to normal. I'm not weak. Not anymore. And I'm going to get stronger. So get out of my way. The light turned into a fire that wrapped itself around Eri. Come out. Mr. Dantes. Eri shouted as she felt a name come into her head. Whoosh. The fire jumped off of her and took the form of a man. He was a tall and elegantly dressed man with long whitish silver hair, styled into a ponytail, and parted over one of his eyes. He wore black shoes with added purple and hints of gold, as well as black shoes, white gloves, and a long black cape. Poof! The persona aimed its palm at the Birdman, and white flames shot out, engulfing the Birdman completely. Aha! The Birdman shouted as it collapsed onto the floor, burnt to death. All of you! Get away from Mr. Akira! Eri shouted, turning her attention to the rest of the Birdmen. Her persona formed several white fireballs and threw them at the Birdman that had been fighting Ren. The fireballs slammed into Birdman, burning them all to a crisp. Ha! That was all Ren said. Eri's persona grabbed her, and suddenly the two teleported in front of Ren. Are you okay, Mr. Akira? I'm fine. And it looks like you manifested your persona. Ren said, taking a look at Eri's persona. Edmond Dantes. I don't suppose you've read The Count of Monte Cristo? Eri shook her head and looked up at her persona. Is that where he's from? Yup. I guess your persona pulled a character from my subconscious rather than yours. Ren said. It happens sometimes. Crack. Crack. Suddenly, the two of them heard a cracking sound, and the two of them looked up at the statues. Cracks started appearing in the statues, as their heads turned to look at them. Rah-ha! The birds cried, as they broke free of the stones, and flapped their wings. Each bird was different. One bird was larger than the others, and entirely covered in crystals. Another bird had a giant beak, with sharp teeth, and spit leaking from it. And the last bird had human hands instead of talons. Well, looks like little Eri thinks she's tough. Cried one of the birds. Guess we better show her her place. Caw! Immediately the sharp-toothed bird rushed at them, trying to devour them. They teleported out of the way using Eri's persona, causing the bird to crash into a wall. The crystal bird rushed at them, its footsteps shaking the room as they approached. Ren and both personas opened fire at the crystal bird, only for their attacks to bounce off it. That's annoying, Ren said, as once again, Eri's persona teleported them out of the way of their attack. Got you! Shouted the bird with the hands, dive bombing at them, coming to grab Eri. Bang! Ack! The handbird cried out in pain as Ren shot it in the eye. Arsene and Dantes shot fire at it, setting the bird ablaze. Ah! Ah. The handbird cried as it died on the floor, burning even still. Well, at least that one wasn't a problem, Ren said before he saw the sharp-toothed bird take another dive at them. Watch out! Eri used her persona to teleport them away before the bird could bite down on them. That is a damn good persona power, Ren noted, before looking at his two remaining foes. And it gives me an idea. Eri, I'm going to distract the crystal bird, and I want you to get the other bird to attack it. Understood? Okay. Eri then used her persona to teleport them, right in front of the crystal bird, before teleporting herself away. Hey! Over here! Ren called, making sure the crystal bird's attention was on him. Slam! 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 The crystal bird immediately started pecking at him, attempting to strike him down while Ren dodged each attack. Meanwhile, the sharp-toothed bird flew up and got in position to charge at Ren once again, only to notice Eri, who just teleported on top of the crystal bird's head. Seeing its real target, the bird immediately charged at Eri and the crystal bird. Crack! Eri teleported away just in time, and the sharp-toothed bird bit into the crystal bird's head, breaking through the crystals and shattering its skull. Killing it. Now! Arsene! Ren once again summoned his persona and unleashed a huge ball of black fire right at the sharp-toothed bird. Boom! The ball slammed into the bird, causing it to explode, destroying the last bird. Eri appeared next to Ran and jumped up in celebration. "We did it! We ugh!" Immediately, she collapsed onto one knee, and her persona vanished. "I don't feel so good." "That happens after you first summon a persona," Ren explained, picking her up. "Especially using as much energy as you did. I'd say we'd made good progress today. Let's end it here." "Okay," Eri said with a pout. She wanted to just finish this already. But given how absolutely exhausted she felt, she could tell that wasn't in the cards. She summoned her persona again, and then everything went white. Ugh! Ren groaned as he opened his eyes. Apparently, Eri could just teleport them out of the cognitive realm altogether. You learn something new every day, Ren thought, before looking at Eri, who was getting up albeit very slowly, rubbing her eyes and yawning as she did. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Eri said. "But also, good." She'd been worried that the moment she started this process, she'd simply collapse from fear. But she actually managed to go into a palace and take on her inner demons. It was a big relief. "Good. We can continue going through the palace next time, although it'll probably take us a few attempts to fully get through it," Ron told her. "Don't try rushing through it, or else you might bite off more than you can chew. Got it?" "Yes, sir." Eri sighed. She really did want to finish this as soon as possible. But she knew it was best to listen to the experts. And she was too tired to argue even if she wanted to. Chapter 269, What is Real, What is Reality? I can't wait for the show. Kay cheered. Quite a few of the Midoriya kids had gathered in a new building that had been built on Midoriya grounds. The Midoriya Planetarium. At a joking suggestion by Achiko, Izuku had this place built to allow the children to view the cosmos, study the stars, etc., etc. It also did something that no other planetarium did. Opening portals to the collective unconsciousness. The room was a large cylinder. On the bottom were beds, with the kids all lying down looking up, waiting for the show to start. Above them was a glass. Very thick glass, meant to keep the heat and chaos energy from seeping down onto the onlookers. And behind it, the portal would open. Meanwhile, outside of that room, was another room filled with workers and machines. Most of them were simply there to turn the machine on and off again, as well as related protocols. Although a couple of them were there to monitor the event and make sure nothing unexpected happened. Back in the viewing room, Kiba and Fu were lying down next to each other, waiting for the show to start. "So are you excited to see the world beyond our own?" Kiba asked. "Surprisingly, yes. About as excited as I can be." Fu shrugged. "I just hope it'll be pretty enough to make me feel something. The show is about to begin. Everyone, get ready," the workers announced. Everyone could hear the sounds of the machines starting, and they all went silent as the lights came off. A crack in reality appeared above them behind the glass, before tearing open and growing larger, becoming a grand portal into the collective unconscious. Whoa! The children looked up at the portal in awe. Staring at the infinite void of consciousness and things they couldn't possibly understand, yet thought were beautiful nonetheless. "It's amazing," Kiba said breathlessly. Eventually, she turned to look at Fu. "So, does this make you feel something?" "Why, yeah." Fu stuttered, his face twisted in confusion. "Weird, I feel." "Partner?" Kaiosei asked in his head. He could tell something was wrong with Fu. Fu was feeling something that he couldn't. As for what he was feeling, Fu could feel something inside him, something that was spread through his entire body, getting pulled and twisted. And then everything went black for him, as his eyes rolled back. "Fu! Fu!" Kiba cried out in a panic, getting everyone's attention. Meanwhile, back in the control room, some of the scientists were looking at the monitors in confusion.
Something's wrong. There's a signal here I've never seen before. It's going through the glass. Shit. Shut it down. Shut it down.
One of the other workers shouted. The workers frantically worked to shut down the portal, turning off the machines that were keeping the portal open. But even with that, the portal didn't close.
The portal's keeping itself open so we can't close it, shouted one scientist. Get the kids out of there. Emergency. Code red, shouted another one, slamming his fist on a big red button.
Back in the viewing chamber, all the kids had gathered around the unconscious Fu, trying to wake him, when the lights suddenly came on and everything flashed red as alarms went off.
That's probably not good, Inu said. Grab him and let's get out of here. Yaba shouted. Kiba went to grab him, but suddenly one of Kyosei's tendrils pushed him away. What? Kyoshi, what are you dash?
They are talking, Kyosei said, using Fu's mouth to speak.
Crack.
Suddenly a crack appeared in the glass above them, and they could see some glowing around the crack. Then suddenly the portal closed. The alarms continued to go on for some time, but none of the kids left, all too concerned about what was going on with Fu. And eventually, the alarms stopped.
Fu! Fu! Kyoshi, what's going on? Kiba demanded. Utterly confused and distraught by this unexpected development. I don't know, Kyosei admitted. Something was happening inside Fu, but he had no idea what.
And then suddenly Fu's body came to life. His eyes rolled forward, his body spasmed, and his long-dead organs suddenly came to life. His heart is trying to pump the still blood through his veins.
Aha! 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 Fu screamed, sounding like he was choking on something at the same time, freaking everyone out further. And then it stopped. Fu's body went still, once more, his eyes rolling back once again.
Everyone was silent for some time, none of them knowing what to say, or what to do. As none of them could even take a guess as to what was happening.
Until Fu spoke. Hey guys, I'm okay. Probably. Okay, thank goodness.
Kiba immediately threw herself onto him and hugged him,
crying tears of joy. Wait, why are your eyes still, backward? Yaba asked as she noticed Fu wasn't quite right.
His eyes were still rolled over, and he wasn't moving anything aside from his mouth.
Well, something happened.
I don't know what exactly, but there's someone else in my body now.
Fu explained. And that person is also me. What? Asked literally everyone. Yeah, like I said. I don't know what happened either. Fu said. Kyosei, can you get me to the lab? I can't move anything but my mouth, and even that's hard.
Kyosei sprouted tendrils from Fu's back and started walking him out of the viewing room,
taking him right to the lab.
You told me that nothing bad would come from just looking at the portal, Izuku said, as he, Futaba, and I walked through the halls of the lab.
As long as we followed the safety protocols, they should have been fine. So what was that?
I told you, specifically, that nothing from what we observed should have been able to harm anyone so long as you followed the protocols.
Futaba clarified. And let's not forget, you didn't ask me to chime in on whether that whole viewing room was a good idea, you talked to my department. You know how hard it is for cognitive scientists to find jobs, you think they're gonna argue with their boss? Growling.
Izuku was kicking himself. Futaba had taken one of her few days off when Izuku had decided to add that CU feature to the planetarium, and so he'd consulted her staff about the issue. He hadn't taken into account how meek cognitive scientists were. As for what happened, I can only tell that Fu somehow interacted with something inside the collective unconscious. And something came out of it, and into Fu. Futaba explained. I don't know how, why, or really anything other than what I just told you. Physically his body seems normal half of the time.
Although sometimes it tries to reanimate itself. And not in the normal way. Like it's trying to be fully alive again, rather than undead. Mai explained. His chaos energy readings are all over the place too. Although despite reading that something went into him, we're not detecting any foreign chaos energy signatures.
We couldn't figure out what was going on at first, but eventually, we threw up our hands and started observing his vestige.
And then we found something. That something being a vestige. Which normally everyone has, except Fu.
Fu notably didn't have one when we last checked, but now not only does he have one, but it's more formed than all the others we observed. Figuring that was the source of the problem, we sent him to Dr. Murasaki.
He's the one who's done the most studying on vestiges, remnants, and the like. He's looking at Fu now.
Eventually, they reached the room they were looking for.
They opened the white metal door and entered. Coming into what almost looked like room for surgery.
With one bed in the center, where Fu lay limp, and a bunch of tools and scientific instruments filling the room.
And standing over Fu was Dr. Murasaki.
He turned when he heard the door open.
"Ah, Mr. Midoriya.
I think you'll be pleased to know that I figured out what happened to your son."
"What? What happened?" Izuku urged the man, growing increasingly impatient the longer he was left in the dark. He just wanted to know that Fu would be okay. And if not, what he needed to do to make him okay. Well, it's a long story. Fu, could you tell us what happened when you passed out?
Dr. Murasaki asked.
Sure, Fu said, still with his eyes rolled back, and still unable to move.
When Fu first opened his eyes after passing out, he thought he was looking in a mirror for a second.
After all, what else would you think when you were looking at yourself?
But he very quickly realized what he was looking at wasn't a mirror. Because while the person he was looking at did look an awful lot like him, he lacked white hair, dead eyes, and green skin. Instead having a completely normal skin tone, black hair, and very alive and expressive brown eyes. However, what really tipped him off was the fact that the boy started screaming.
Aha!
The boy immediately jumped back, falling on his butt as he looked at Fu fearfully.
Why does my life have to be so weird? Fu sighed. He looked around.
The two of them were currently in a small, white, featureless hallway. With two doors on either end. What was weird was that both doors gave him feelings. The door closer to him gave him a feeling of safety, while the other gave a feeling of dread and fear. And for some reason, the boy getting closer to the dread door made him very, very nervous. The boy scrambled to his feet and turned to run.
Only to stop in his tracks.
Fu could only assume that the boy felt the same feeling from that door that he did.
Hey, I know this is probably scary, but I need you to come with me. Who are you? The boy turned around to face Fu.
Still looking to be afraid of him, but far less so than the door.
Where am I? My name is Fu. Fu introduced himself. And yours? Fu Hai. The boy was introduced.
The fear on his face was replaced with curiosity.
Do I know you? You just might, Fu answered. Honestly, he'd felt a strong sense of familiarity with the boy as well. Like meeting an old friend.
And along with that, he felt a strong urge to protect him. And to make sure he went through the door on his side, rather than the spooky ominous door. Given that they looked very similar, and had the exact same name, it didn't take a genius to figure out that this boy was Fu.
Somehow. This wasn't a dream. Fu didn't have those. Not to mention he was feeling more emotion than he normally would.
I have no idea what's going on, but probably best to go with the flow, and get through the door.
Fu thought to himself. Look, I know you must be confused and scared. But you see that door behind me?
Fu said, pointing to what he was talking about.
Do you feel like that door is safe? Like you want to go through it? Fu Hai looked at the door, and then back at Fu, and nodded. Then let's go, Fu said, reaching out a hand. Fu Hai looked hesitant for a moment, but the feeling of familiarity and trust erased most of the unease he felt towards Fu. And he took his hand. The two went over to the safe door, and Fu pushed it open, revealing nothing but bright light. Here we go, Fu said, hoping that this feeling wasn't a trick. The two entered the light, and everything washed away. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX one both familiar and foreign. It looked similar to Fu's room back at the house. But it was covered in decorations. Posters of heroes, TV shows, etc. As well as other decorations. Oh great, this is still happening. Fu sighed. He honestly hoped that once they walked through the door, that all of this would end. He should have known. Is this my room? Fuhai asked, looking around and recognizing all his stuff. But the room itself was unfamiliar. Okay, well, let's. Fu tried to think of what to do, but honestly, he was stumped. He had no clue what was happening, or why. So he couldn't even begin to figure out how to fix it. Let's just sit tight, someone will dash. Slam. Suddenly the door to the room slammed open, revealing more light behind it. Fuhai was covered in light, and before either of them could react, he was whisked away through the door by some invisible force, before the door slammed shut. Okay, sure, I guess that might as well happen. Fu sighed. And then the room began to shake. As if an earthquake was happening. It lasted for a few seconds, before stopping as suddenly as it started. Slam! Suddenly the door slammed open once again, and Fuhai was chucked back into the room. Trembling and gasping for air. Fuhai! Fu immediately ran to the boy's aid, hugging him as his instincts told him to do. It's okay. It's okay. You're okay. Fuhai tried to put into words what just happened, but he couldn't say anything past his panic. Tears blocked his sight and snot filled his nose. He couldn't see. He could barely hear anything over his own breath. All he could do was feel Fu's presence. A calming, reassuring presence. It was strange just how much Fu being around him calmed him down. And with him there, and after a few minutes, he managed to calm down enough to talk. I felt like I was dying. Fuhai explained, still shivering and crying his eyes out. I could feel everything. But it felt like I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Did you see anyone? Hear anyone? Fu asked. Having a strong feeling about what might have happened. Other kids? I think so. Fuhai said, trying to recall the background noise he heard as he spasmed about. They were calling you. So he did take over my body, or I guess our body? I don't know. Fu sighed. Still rubbing circles into the boy's back to calm him down. Well, I guess I know what to do next. Fu took a few more moments to calm him, before moving back. Fuhai looked at him with wide shocked eyes. Begging to feel his embrace again. Okay, I'm going to go through that door. And once I do, I'll find a way to help you. Fu told him. Do you trust me? Yes, Fuhai answered almost immediately, much to his own surprise. Fu nodded, before turning to the door. It was still open and emitting light. He walked towards it and attempted to go through it. Only to hit what felt like a wall. Oh come on. Fu groaned. He pressed his hands up against the invisible wall and pushed. Feeling his hands sinking in slightly. It wasn't like a solid wall. More elastic. Maybe he could push through it. And so Fu tried, pushing his entire body against the invisible wall. Pushing. And pushing. And pushing. Until his head came through.
After my head went through, I could speak again, but I still can't see, Fu explained. I still can't move either. And no matter what I do, I can't get the rest of my body through the barrier. Fascinating, isn't it? Dr. Murasaki said, looking absolutely over the moon. Taking his story into account, and looking over all my research, I've come up with the answer. Simply put, the Fu you've known. The one that's been around ever since that car accident. Isn't Fu. What? Izuku asked, completely lost. Not me, Fu said, equally confused. Gonna have to explain that. When Fuhai was hit by that car, his quirk was still developing. Not fully formed. Dr. Murasaki explained. So when he was dying, his half-baked quirk attempted to force itself into fully forming to save him. But it failed. Fuhai's soul had left his body by the time his quirk finished forming. Just before it could save his life. However, it still fixed him up. And it still tried to save him. But with his soul gone, his body needed something else to run it. His vestige. Mai's eyes widened. Of course. A vestige is almost like a second soul, left behind in the body after it dies. It has memories, feelings, thoughts, and most of the things from the original soul. If someone wanted to bring back a dead person, they would use their vestige to reanimate them. The process has never been perfect, but if it was, it could almost be like the person was brought back in full. I thought the closest thing we saw to that was Kurogiri. I never suspected Fu would be, but that would explain a few things. Like why we couldn't find his vestige at first. Dr. Murasaki explained. Because he was the vestige. And why some of his emotions and sensations are dumbed down or missing. If it was just because he was dead, he shouldn't have been able to feel anything, it shouldn't be that weirdly selective. It would also explain why his quirk is the way that it is. Why bring him back as a zombie? Why make him rot? It's because this Fu was never alive to begin with. He was born dead. So why wouldn't he come back as a zombie? An incomplete soul, born from a cosmic mistake. So Fu's been a clone? Izuku couldn't believe what he was hearing. His quirk just replaced his soul with a backup? Basically. Dr. Murasaki confirmed. Since it no longer had the original, it had to make do. However, when we opened a portal to the collective unconscious, that changed. That place doesn't just possess the minds and souls of the living, but the dead as well. Fuhai's soul likely possessed some trace of his quirk, and if an opportunity arose, it would attempt to revive itself. We provided that opportunity, and Fuhai's soul and body called out to each other. That hallway you saw was likely your mind trying to comprehend the soul bridge you two created. The door you didn't choose led to death, which is why your survival instincts told you to avoid it. The other door leads back to Fu's body, bringing the long-dead real Fu back into the world of the living. Wow, I thought the only thing that could make this day worse was being told I'd be stuck like this. Fu thought to himself. But no. My day found a new, creative way to get worse. However, there were issues. Dr. Murasaki said, looking back over Fu. Fu's body isn't the way it used to be. Hell, it's not even the same body the original died in. His body's been rotted and destroyed, completely replaced time and time again. Reborn as a living corpse. His body is still trying to put the original soul back in charge, but the body is no longer suitable for it. And the copy can't take control either because the body outright rejects him, so long as the original still stays inside his body. The only reason he can do this much is because he's had control for so long. So what do we do now? Izuku would deal with the whole copy thing later. For now, all he needed to know was that he had 2 kids to save, 2 kids that were the same kid, but again, deal with that later. Assuming you want both souls to have their own bodies, we have one solution. Dr. Murasaki said. Rip out the original soul. Chapter 270, Resurrection F. I died. Fu shouted as Fu and him were once again in the room they shared inside their own body.
I died. Well, he's taking this about as well as I thought he would.
Fu thought. He'd been repeating I died for about 10 minutes now, rocking back and forth in the fetal position, while Fu kept patting him on the back trying to calm him down.
It's okay. You're dead anymore. Fu told him.
You're gonna be alive again, as soon as they find a way to rip your soul out of this body.
They're gonna rip my soul out.
Fu wailed, tears pouring out of his eyes like rivers.
Yeah, when I say it out loud I guess that's not comforting.
Fu sighed. Once again Fu was at a loss on how to handle this. What does one say to comfort someone after finding out they died, and now they are going to have their soul removed from their body, and placed into a new one? So he just waited. After hours, Fu eventually started to calm down. Or rather he cried so much he tired himself out. We're rich now, Fu said, hoping to distract the other boy.
This did get his attention. Fu pointing his attention to his other self? What? Yeah, after Mom, you know.
Fu saw the boy tear up again. His mother's abandonment was another massive blow to Fu's mind. We got adopted by a really rich guy.
And then he got even richer.
He's probably the most rich and powerful person in the whole world right now.
How?
Fu asked. Perhaps forcing himself, to focus on Fu's words instead of the terrifying situation he was in. That he was powerless to fix. Fortunately for him, Fu's story was very, very long. So how do we go about this process?
Izuku asked.
He, Futaba, Mai, and Murasaki had taken their discussion to a meeting room, while leaving Fu's body under supervision.
I've made designs for a machine that should be capable of removing souls entirely.
Dr. Murasaki explained.
Of course, I've only ever worked on it in my free time. And I've never constructed, much less tested it.
Unless we want to risk potentially permanent consequences for Fu, we should test it on animals.
Fine. Izuku sighed.
He definitely didn't like the idea of ripping out animals' souls for the sake of experimentation, but he had little choice at this point.
Proceed with the experiments immediately.
Top priority.
But after we take out the soul, what next? We need a body to put it in.
Theoretically we could have Yami make a grim body, but I'm unsure of how that would interact with his soul. Worst case scenario, the negativity corrupts him.
Mai said.
It would be best to simply build him a new body from scratch.
Why bother with an organic body? Murasaki asked. Why not give him an improved, robotic one?
I think confining the boy to flesh would be short-sighted. The boy's been through too much. Waking as an android just might cause his mind to collapse.
Izuku said.
The door opened, and Dr. Hata stepped through.
Sorry for being late, I just got briefed on the situation. Dr. Hata, can you create Fuai a body from scratch? Izuku asked. In most cases, that would be hard. But for Fuhai, it should be simpler.
Dr. Hata explained, taking a seat at the table.
Fu's DNA is coded to rebuild itself. All it requires is materials and chaos energy.
With enough of that, any piece of Fu could be grown into a fully formed body.
We've been studying it for that reason.
The only real issue is making sure the body is alive for Fuhai.
But I can think of a few ways to fix that problem. In short, we can absolutely do it. Good. Then our plan of action is set.
I want everything done as quickly as possible and without flaw.
Izuku said. Take no risk. Test everything. I won't have any unexpected occurrences this time. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX
rest of Liberation were chilling in the band room, relaxing after another practice session, when Nice suddenly brought that up.
Why yeah. It's crazy. Fuku shivered. I'm not sure which is creepier. Dying and your body getting right back up thinking it's you. Or being a copy and not even knowing it.
I'm telling you, this place gets crazier and crazier every day, Sheena said, sipping some hot chocolate.
So everyone has a vestige, and Fu's vestige became its own personality. Am I a vestige? Nies asked. Sheena shrugged. You'll have to ask the scientists.
So, what do you guys think about this?
Ko asked using text-to-speech. I think it's pretty cool. Like a plot twist in real life. I feel bad for both of them.
I know Fu doesn't feel much, but all this has to be at least kinda hard on him. He just found out all this time, he wasn't who he thought he was. And that he's had a counterpart who was dead this whole time. And that other Fu literally died. Now that I think about it, there's a lot of people here who've been killed and come back to life.
Eri and Kiba did that too. Yeah, it's kinda weird. Fuku noted.
But, I think we should just treat it like a new kid came in.
Fu and other Fu will probably feel like they're freaks, and the other people will think they're freaks.
We need to make sure that they know they're still our friends.
Or family. Wow. That's surprisingly deep for you, Fuku. Sheena said, slightly impressed by Fuku's insight. Good job.
Ko gave her a round of applause, which made Fuku blush with embarrassment.
I just thought about how I would feel if I was them, Fuku muttered. And that's what we love about you, Fuku.
Nies praised, seemingly a bit more chipper than before for some reason.
Anyway, back to practice, guys. I'm fired up. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX
smothered by darkness. Kiba shouted as she played Doom Never Ending on stream in her room.
I can't believe she hasn't died yet. Little Kibas become a true gamer. How they grow. Knock knock knock. Lady Kiba, I would like a word. Yonda said from the other side of the door. Can it not wait? I'm in the middle of something.
Kiba sighed as she paused the game.
I'm aware, but I need to speak to you sooner rather than later. Later. Yonda told her. Kiba groaned. 1 minute my followers, I'm having a conversation with Yonda. And we can't hear it because it's in their heads. Don't know much about that Yonda girl. Wonder what she's like. So what's your opinion on the whole Fu situation? Yonda asked. You seem very relaxed. Is that all you came here for? Kiba rolled her eyes. Fu being a clone changes nothing. I never even met the original Fu, so it's not like he replaced him for me. As for the other Fu, he'll just be one more sibling. And I'm so relaxed because caretaker, has assured me that Fu will be fine. Yes, that is what he said. But I want you to understand, Father and the scientist barely know anything about this situation. So there is a possibility something could go wrong. Yonda said. Kiba glared at her. Yonda. What did you come here for? Oh, she mad. She only makes that expression when someone insults the quirkless or her dad. What did Yonda say? Simply to make sure that if the situation worsens, you don't lose your cool. Yonda said. We all know how close you and Fu are. If something happened, you might forget to control your strength for a second. Or worse, go into that berserk state. That's not happening. Kiba thought firmly. Fu is going to be fine, and even if I did lose control of myself, this suit will. The suit only does so much, and you know that. Yonda reminded her. But, I have something that can help you out a bit more. She reached behind her and pulled out a bag, handing it to Kiba. Kiba opened it and found that there were a few of Amai's calming candies inside them. Did Daddy let you have these? Yes, I actually asked for them this time. Yonda explained. He has similar worries. And he wants you to have these just in case. But, he said that everything would be fine. Kiba said, starting to sound worried. Everything should be fine. Yanda corrected her. But everything should have been fine when we went to see the collective unconscious. But something that no one could have predicted would happen. And in case that happens again, we need you to be prepared. Such is the burden of power. Okay, now it looks like she got some really bad news. Lady Kiba, are you okay? I do apologize for having to worry you, but it's best we do this, rather than the worst happening, you accidentally turning someone into soup. Yanda explained. Again, such is the burden of power. But, the chances of something unexpected happening are low, and everything should be fine. So don't be too upset. And one more thing, the new Fu is going to be alive, not undead. Which means he'll feel pain. So don't go treating him like the old Fu, even if he can regenerate. Okay. Okay. Kiba answered grimly. Thank you for reminding me. A week later, everything was finally in place. They were ready for the separation process. Meanwhile, Fu and Fuhai were in their little cognitive room, waiting for the extraction to happen. Fuhai was trembling a bit, and Fu was keeping his distance, trying to make sure he didn't get in the way of the process. This isn't gonna hurt, right? Fuhai asked. Fu shrugged. I don't know. But it wouldn't last long if it did. And it's better than being stuck in here forever. Why yeah you're right, Fuhai said, still sounding utterly terrified. Remember, even when we separate, you won't be alone, Fu assured him. I'll always be there for you. Always. Thanks Fu, Fuhai said, almost smiling a bit. Crash, crash. Suddenly a giant shadow hand crashed through the roof and grabbed onto Fuhai. Aha! Fuhai screamed in terror, as he squirmed and tried to fight it, while the hand pulled him upwards. Don't fight back. Fu told him. Their body was trying to fight the removal process. Fu himself felt an intense urge to try and stop this, but he was able to fight that urge back. Just let it happen. The hand continued to pull through the ceiling, eventually Fuhai reaching that same elastic barrier that Fu had to go through. But that barrier did very little to stop the process, and Fuhai was pulled through it. And then, everything went white. Fu opened his eyes for the first time in a while, as he took back control of his body. Immediately he tried to move his limbs, and finally, he had success. His arms and legs moved as he wanted to. Thank goodness. Fu sighed. Then he looked around. He was in another room in the labs. Strapped to a table, with what looked like some kind of giant claw hanging over him. Thought the process would be a bit more elegant, but if it works, Fu said. The door opened, and Izuku and Dr. Murasaki came in. Alongside Ji and Kiba. Fu. Are you okay? Can you move everything okay? Izuku said, running up to Fu to check over him. I'm fine, Ibragh. Fu immediately choked on his own intestines as Kiba hugged him. Don't ever worry me like that again. Kiba said, crushing his bones with her hug, as she tried not to cry tears of joy. That's a command from your queen. Fu rolled his eyes. I'll try my best, Your Majesty. The soul has been collected, and is awaiting its new body. Dr. Murasaki explained. I suggest we hurry. I wouldn't want to be stuck as a bodiless soul. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX
On the other side of the glass was a new body.
An exact duplicate of Fu.
Lying down, strapped to a bed, in the center of a strange-looking machine.
Let the resurrection begin,
Dr. Murasaka said with a huge smile on his face. The machine came to life as a mechanical claw came down, with glowing syringes attached to it.
Stab.
The claws stabbed into the new body and injected it with the glowing liquid before pulling back. Then a ring rose up from the floor around the body, containing many crystals. A few moments passed, and then... Ah! Fu-Hai came to life, his body gasping for air as it rapidly twitched. In the next moment the rings powered up, energy cracking around it like lightning, before that energy shot into Fu-Hai. Suddenly his skin turned pinkish, his hair turned back to black, and life returned to his eyes. The rings powered down, and a mechanical arm carrying a syringe came down, before stabbing the needle into the squirming boy's neck, quickly rendering him unconscious. All systems read positive. Dr. Murasaka turned to Izuku. He is alive. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX regained consciousness. His eyes opened, and light flooded in. Ah! He hissed in pain, as his eyes tried to adjust to the light. Eventually, they did so. He could see his surroundings. He looked to be in some kind of super-advanced hospital room. The boy lay on a bed, with several wires attached to things on his body, and machines making beeping sounds.
Finally awake, huh?
Fu-Hai turned to the side and saw Fu sitting next to him, reading a book.
Fu!
Fu-Hai immediately went in and hugged him.
Am I alive? Am I really alive?
Is all that scary stuff over?
Yup.
Now you just gotta stay here for about a day to make sure everything's alright.
Fu said. Why? Is something wrong? Am I gonna die again?
Fu-Hai cried, suddenly on the verge of tears again. No, we just want to make sure, Fu assured him, giving him a gentle pat on the head.
You're the first person to have fully come back from the dead, so they want to be through. Alright. Fu-Hai calmed down a bit.
Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr
no. My stomach. Something's wrong. I'm gonna die again. I think you're just hungry. Fu pointed out. This boy is gonna be a handful. Chapter 271, Me, Myself and Fu Hai. This room is so big. Fuati said in awe as he looked at his and Fu's new shared room. Well, it's a room for two, so yeah, Fu explained, as he finally moved the last thing in. I told you he was super rich, didn't I? Anyway, what do you want to do now? The pool? Fu Hai shook his head. No. I can't swim. You could learn? Fu suggested. But what if I drown while I'm learning? Fu Hai gulped. I wouldn't let you drown. And I don't think you can drown. Fu said. Your regeneration would probably stop it. But still, I wouldn't let it happen in the first place. Fu Hai shook his head. Nah. Too scary. Fu sighed. Okay, what if we played some sports outside? I don't have sunscreen yet, Fu Hai said. Why do you need sunscreen? It's not that hot. Fu pointed out. But the sun's still dangerous. Fu Hai argued stubbornly. Alright, so let's play some sports inside, Fu suggested. But what if I get hurt while playing? Fu Hai said. You wanna read some books? Fu relented. What if I get a paper cut? Fu Hai asked fearfully. Fu face-bombed. We can read using tablets or something, would that work for you? Okay. But can you read for me? I can't read yet. Fu Hai said. Oh yeah, I taught myself to read after I died. Or I guess after you died. Fu said. Fine. Sit down, I'll find something to read. Ta xxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxx
Ambushed her in the kitchen, before doing this.
Ha! What? Help! Fuku was very taken aback by this. Help with what? Fu Hai. He won't do anything. Fu groaned. He's too afraid of doing almost everything because he's worried he'll get hurt somehow. He just stays in his room, never comes out, and just watches TV and reads stuff on a tablet. If I don't do something, he'll spend the rest of his life stuck in his room, huddled in fear.
Oh, okay.
Why are you asking me?
Fuku asked, although she already kinda knew the answer.
Why not ask Izuku?
Because he's busy, Fu said.
And I'm not.
Fuku pouted.
I mean, I'm not as busy as him, but still, fine.
I'll help you. I don't think I can do anything about him being so afraid. I mean, he did actually die.
But I can probably get him to go outside and stuff.
Maybe.
It's better than nothing.
Fu shrugged.
XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Fuku asked.
Yes, big sis. Fuhai said, sounding nervous but ready.
This is ridiculous. Fu sighed.
The three of them were outside, finally, and ready for floating lessons.
Except they weren't using the regular pool.
They were using a small, inflatable pool.
Can he even float in that? Fu asked Fuku, whispering so Fuhai couldn't hear him. Just barely. And more importantly, he can't drown in it. Fuku explained.
Getting Fuhai this far had been a difficult endeavor. First, they had to lather him in sunscreen to even get him to go outside.
As for teaching him to float,
first Fuku convinced him that he had to learn to swim.
Telling him that if he did somehow end up in water, he'd definitely want that skill in order to survive. Playing off his paranoia a bit.
Of course, Fuhai was still hesitant to enter a body of water, so as a compromise, Fuku told him she'd teach him how to float first, and they'd use an inflatable pool so he couldn't possibly drown.
Okay, let's do this, Fuku said, offering her hand. Fuhai eagerly took it, and with Fuku's guidance, stepped into the pool.
Alright, now just lay down, and relax, Fuku advised, as Fuhai started laying on his back, letting the water hold him.
Fuku could feel his grip on her hand tighten.
Each time his body bobbed up and down in the water she could feel him grow more tense.
It's okay, the moving up and down thing is normal. Whatever you do, don't panic. Take deep breaths. You're surprisingly good at this. Fu noticed. Fuhai did as she instructed, and breathed in and out, focusing on that instead of the water around him.
Eventually, he found himself continuously floating,
feeling as if the water was holding him up. I am doing it. Fuhai gasped. I'm actually floating. It's really not that impressive. Fu thought. Good job. Let's do it for a little longer, and then we can stop for today. Fuku told him. We just started? Fu pointed out.
Yeah, but he's already done so much, and he must be really tired, Fuku said.
Fuhai nodded.
And since you did such a good job, I'll make you your favorite food as a reward, Fuku promised. Fuhai's eyes went wide, and a bit of drool came out of his mouth.
Spaghetti and meatballs? Oh yeah, I forgot that was our favorite.
Fu thought, briefly remembering their mother making it on a whim, and then regretting it as Fuhai asked for it almost every day afterward.
Sure. Now just stay calm, don't move too much, and keep floating. Fuku instructed. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX stood behind Fuku. It was a day later, and the two of them were now in the kitchen. I get worried about that too. That's why I triple check it every time I come into the kitchen. Fuku explained. I check everything at least 3 times before I do any cooking. So you don't need to worry about it. Now, let's learn how to cook. Fuhai nodded. Fuku had told him that there may be a time when he might one day end up without anyone to cook for him, so he needed to learn how to cook for the sake of his survival. Thankfully, Fuku was fully capable of teaching him. Let's start with super simple stuff, Fuku said. Do you like mac and cheese? XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX
go out every once in a while. He hadn't expected her to get him to leave the room every day. Literally every day, she would get him to do something outside, under the guise of teaching him survival skills. Teaching him how to swim so he could survive in water. Teaching him how to cook so he could make his own food if no one else could. Teaching him how to play sports so he could increase his reaction speed. Although today's endeavor seemed far-fetched. Nah. No way. Fuhai refused. Camping is too scary. Forests are too scary. Honestly, Fu was starting to believe that Fuku was just testing how much she could convince him to do. Okay. I completely understand. Honestly, I wouldn't want to go by myself. If it wasn't super special and important survival training. Fuku told him. Survival training? Fuhai repeated, sounding both curious and a bit scared. Oh, I have to hear this. Fu thought. So imagine this. You get kidnapped by villains, and they dump you in a forest to fend for yourself. Could you survive in a forest with nothing but your clothes? Fuku asked, seriously. Can you learn to make fires to keep yourself warm and cook food? Can you tell what kind of plants are poisonous and what aren't? Can you? And no. Fuhai stuttered fearfully. Then you need to learn so you don't die in the wild, Fuhai. Fuku urged him. Wow. That was, wow. Fu thought. He couldn't even begin to list the amount of logical issues there were in that. First of all. Okay. I'll learn. Fuhai said. I'll learn how to survive. Fu had to fight hard not to facepalm. All right. I give up. I will never understand this level of paranoia. Guess I'll just roll with it. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. I thought you said you couldn't read? Fu asked as he saw Fuhai reading a bunch of books on his bed. Big Sister Ji was teaching me, and I learned it really easily, Fuhai explained. She said that maybe since I'm using your brain, maybe some of the information is still there, waiting to be unlocked. Yeah, sure, that might as well be a thing. Fu shrugged. Knock, knock, knock. Come in, Fu said. Izuku opened the door and entered the room, with a box in his hands. Hey boys, I brought something for Fuhai. For me? Fuhai asked, giving the box a curious look. Izuku went over to Fuhai, set the box down, and opened it, revealing an Aegis robe. This is the same kind of cloak that I wear, to protect me. Then Izuku tapped his shoulder, and the illusion faded, revealing that Izuku was wearing that robe, and was using a mind weaver to make it invisible. It'll protect you from most things. Falls, hits, whatever. Izuku explained before looking over to Fu. Fu, would you mind showing off its capabilities? Sure. Fu then shot out one of Kyosei's tendrils from his body, and wrapped it around Izuku, picking him up. Kyosei then attempted to squeeze Izuku, only for the cloak to fight against his grip. Then Fu made some sharpened tendrils and tried to stab Izuku, only for the cloak to deflect them, the teeth closing in and protecting Izuku's face. See, Izuku said as Fu put him down. Cool. Fuhai gasped in awe, immediately taking the cloak from the box, and putting it on as quickly as possible. As he finished putting it on, a mind weaver came out of the box and crawled onto his shoulder, turning the cloak invisible. That will allow you to still make your normal clothes visible, Izuku said. You can even turn yourself invisible if you ask for it. Cool. Fuhai repeated, sounding absolutely stoked, as he launched himself at Izuku, hugging him as hard as he could. Thank you, Dad. You're welcome, and make sure to thank Yami and Shiroku since they make these, Izuku said, hugging him back. Maybe now he'll be brave enough to go down the stairs without me having to carry him. Fu thought. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX
The original me. Yeah, I'm a clone, trying not to think about that.
Despite starting off as the same person, obviously, our personalities are quite different considering all that's happened to me, and my unique situation.
Fuhai is still younger than me and is very emotional. And by emotional, I mean fearful.
Fuhai has a crippling fear of death. That will keep him from doing anything that could have any chance of him getting hurt.
Which is pretty much everything.
Fortunately, Fuku found a way around this. Fuhai is so afraid of death that he's willing to do things he normally wouldn't for the sake of learning survival skills. Because of this, he is extremely easy to manipulate. Thankfully, Fuku only has good intentions, but I fear what Yanda will do when she finds out about this. When it comes to our quirks, they should be similar. He hasn't gotten hurt, so we can't test it, but with some key differences. First of all, he's alive, so he can still feel pain. However, his body doesn't rot, so he doesn't need to consume as much meat as I do.
He also doesn't smell. He also doesn't have the slightly enhanced strength that I had without Kyosei.
However, the most important difference is one we're still not 100% sure about. Apparently, there is a chance that even if Fuhai's body is completely destroyed, his soul will just go back into my body if it's close by. This has, and unfortunately, caused him to want to be as close to me as possible.
24/7.
Oh, joy. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 51.
If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.